Hello and welcome to Confronting Injustice. I am your host, Linda Solomon. James Watson joins me as we discuss the injustices of the criminal legal system. Our guest today is Reverend Laura Reyes, pastor of the United Baptist Church in Jamaica Plain. Welcome,
Thank you so
Reverend
much for the
Reyes.
invitation this morning. We're
Thank
glad
you.
to be here. Thank you so much.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I'm a Boston native. Okay. I have 2 adult sons. I am a widow. I pastor a church in Jamaica Plain going into my 14th year. I am working at Reyes as an overnight advocate. I'm the ex-chaplain for Suffolk County. I was there for 21 years. Also volunteered at Framingham MCI. I was there volunteer for 8 years. And there's a whole list of other jobs that we don't have time to discuss.
Okay, wow. Welcome. Can you tell us, well, you know the name of our show is Confronting Injustice, and we're just concerned about primarily the criminal legal system, but other injustices as well. Can you tell us your thoughts about the connection between your work in the prisons and just injustice or injustices?
So, as I was sharing with you a little earlier, I'll tell you a little bit how I got into the prison ministry, which I didn't share all of it. Okay. When I was younger, I used to, when one of my friends would go to jail, I would always talk to him on the phone, put money on the phone, talk to him, go visit him. And I just thought that was this routine, they're my friends, I'm gonna go, support them. Right. Not knowing that God was leading me to a higher calling. And so I started going to the MCI Framingham. Started in 1996 with Reverend Clovis Turner. I was at a breakfast and I knew that she went to the prison. I said, can I go? And she said, yeah, you can go. And she said, we only go 2 times. I said, well, probably the only time I want to go is 2. I don't want to go no more than 2 times. But ended up being the volunteer for 8 years. And then my pastor at the time, Bishop John M. Borders, was at Nashua Street, which was called Child Street at that time. Right. He said, I want you to come down and serve the women. And I was like, well, I don't want to go serve the women. I'm on my way to MCI Framingham. And he said, well, I want you to come down. So I went down and started ministering to them in 1998. And to 2016 was my time out there. 21 years. Started with the women at there. Just administered them on Saturday mornings and then Sunday mornings when I got licensed to preach in 1999, went Sunday mornings. And then they got moved over to South Bay in 2005. Okay. And so I started with the men. I stayed with the men. I didn't go to South Bay with them. I stayed with the men and spent 2 years in what they used to call the murder unit. Really? And I sat with them 2 years and began to their thought process, their not so thought process, how they were unjustly accused, just seeing their process, which was very intriguing and challenging because they would tell me things that, and I couldn't be subpoenaed because I'm chaplain. And so that was developed a trust that I thought was really, I was awe about it because they hear these strange individuals accused of certain crimes, they felt that comfortable with me to share their crimes, and I would tell them my opinion, what I thought and what I didn't think. Okay. And we developed a really rapport, which was, I'm still today having a rapport with many of those gentlemen and women today. So I'm grateful about that. It's so unbalanced because our young men and women get caught in the system not knowing. No, we ultimately know that we shouldn't do wrong. That's ultimately, we were all raised to know right from wrong. But situations do occur and they come up, and it's difficult, especially when you get caught into something I think earlier we were talking about joint venture. Joint venture, and as we know it, I've always taught my kids, sometimes people change, and I'll tell you a story about my son that you met. Okay. And I always tell them, be careful, getting in people's cars because you haven't been around them a certain time. And you don't know what's going on. Right. And sure enough, he was going to church one Friday night. And he got a ride from his friend. His friend said, come on. And he got in the car. And no sooner got in the car, the state police pulled the car over because the tail light was out. Okay, so now the tail light, so of course now, for a young black man in the car, they asked for the driver's license, but they should have. But they asked my son and the other person in the car for their license, and they're like, and I was telling them, they can't do that. So my son said, he just complied. But the other gentleman in the back seat had a bag of marijuana, and he kicked down the seat, and he had a bottle of alcohol he put in the seat. But they didn't ask any other questions but for the driver, and asked him where they were going. And my son said the only thing he saw was my face. He wasn't even worried about the state police. He was just worried about, oh God, how am I going to tell her I got arrested? I was on my way to church. How do I tell her this? But come to find out, I said to him, he had a suspended license, the driver. They impounded the car.
What?
Right? So here we go. So if they had happened to have guns in the car or other paraphernalia, they would have went to jail.
Incredible.
So that's sometimes, that's the caught when you're supposed to have friends. So if you get caught up with, with your friends and you don't understand, the dynamics of it, you get caught. There's a lot of young men and women sitting in jail right now for not knowing, getting into an automobile and not knowing what was in the car. Or not knowing they had just witnessed a crime or they had just robbed a bank or robbed a store or beat up somebody and how they get in the car. It's cold outside because that night my son was cold. Got in the car and then thinking of it. Then this joint venture when you do know.
Or even if you don't know, like that, it's this whole joint venture is something that we'll be talking about a bit more in the future.
I'm sorry. But when you talk about that, there were laws created in the 1600s, and they're still at the State House today, where I believe that our state officials should have a group of people to go down and spend the time. They give enough money for everything else to spend the time to go on and attack those laws, because those are those laws that they're still using today that affects, even with your case, it affects, because nobody's looking, some of these things need to be amended, some of them be taken out.
Right.
They shouldn't exist at all because they were designed for us.
Right.
And so that's the thing, and the courts are bound because they're bound by law. So nobody's not saying, well, it was written in 1620 and we should really take it out. You have to have a group of people to go in and attack them. So cases like joint venture, because eventually joint venture, you should not be accused of committing exactly.
That and the perpetrator
and the person that
himself.
actually did it. You make it. So what they're saying is that, let's say we're out together and you commit a crime, I'm supposed to tell them that you did the crime, so now I get off.
Right.
So it's unbalanced because, it's sticky. And so where do you draw the line? Drawing the line is going down and attacking those laws that were specially designed to keep us entrapped.
Right.
And then you got people that don't want to believe it, but that's the truth. Because even my oldest son was in a vehicular homicide situation, and the DA wanted 5 to 7. And loss of life is not saying it shouldn't be, should be waived, but 5 to 7 years, he doesn't have a criminal record, and it was an accident, it wasn't on purpose, versus that another young man who was Caucasian ended up killing 2 people in a vehicular homicide situation, and they gave him 5 to 7 for 2 people.
Really?
Wow. Gun charges, automatic 18 months, but then Caucasians get probation. And so our young men and women, because women now are getting involved like men, need to know up front, when they talk to their lawyers, when they're sitting behind Nassau Street over there in Framingham, to know what they're up against. And then it's when they start getting caught up into probation periods that they shouldn't. Because a lot of probation does is keep a noose around your neck.
Right.
And it just keeps you more bound, because I know I'm not agreeing with time, but if you're going to get 6 months, you get the 6 months and don't take any probation period, because now you're going to do 6 months and then have 6 years probation. That's not correct. So again, the laws have to be amended and attacked and adjusted so that we don't fall into, or our kids don't fall. And then we as parents or overseers, ministers, we need to come in and be a community affair. Because when I grew up in church, everybody was involved in everybody's life. Even the police officers, everybody knew who was what in the community. You know what I mean? It had a mutual respect. Crime was committed, but not to the extent now. And I want to bring up the Stewart case in 1988 with Charles Stewart, when I lived around in that area, and I remember they would line up the young men, 18, 20 men, line them up, pull it, embarrass them, make them pull their pants down, and it was interrogating them, all because
on the street,
right, all in the street. All because this man said that a black man did this to his wife. And knowing that most of our upbringing, we would never do anything like that. They might have did something to him, and she would have been sitting in there with a head screaming and crying and running out the car, but they never would have did anything to her. And so again, these disparities, and we're still facing it, but nobody's saying anything. We're waiting for that one individual. We all could be that voice. And that's the key. We don't have that voice that we say. Everybody's still waiting for Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King's not coming back. You know, we're waiting for that one ended person to stop, and we could all start. And we need to say something instead of saying it's a shame or it shouldn't take place. Well, what can we do? How do we start and put pressure on the state officials to amend these laws?
Yeah.
And not demand in a riot per se, but just stay on them. You know, phone calls, showing up, just in their face, and saying we demand that these laws be amended because our children are being ostracized, they're unjust. You've got men in jail for 30, 40 years because of laws that have not been amended.
Right.
You know, and they keep getting caught.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that the laws are still in the books and they're unconstitutional and they were race-based back then.
By race.
So I, totally agree with you. They need to be addressed, no doubt. And hopefully someone listening may be inspired
To do that.
to do something about that. But I hear you saying it's a community effort, everyone. Let's not wait for one person.
Exactly.
We all have a voice.
We have a responsibility to, and instead of putting the blame on one specific group, it's all of our responsibility. And it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to come in and correct some things, adjust some things, and put some challenges. You know, and then also put the morals and values back into our children.
Yes.
Wow.
That's a piece too that you want to blame. You can't expect the system to raise your children.
Absolutely.
You have to be that one who raised them so that when they go out, the Bible says to train up a child in the way they should go, and when they get older, they won't depart from it. So that's still true now.
Right.
You know,
I
not that they won't
that.
do anything, but they'll come back to that.
Right.
No, let me do some things differently.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's the key, morals and values, and then we go and then be dealt differently. And even my son being incarcerated, the officers that arrested him, and they were like, my God, we don't even want to arrest him. He just the caliber of person is, the character. You know what I mean? And that's what we need to instill in our kids.
Yeah, we do.
We do. Well, we're single, and I'm a single parent. I raised both, young men in the hood, what you want to say, so to speak, South End hood and Dorchester hood, right? And it's all about, I was raised in a two-parent house, and you need that balance. But if you don't, your morals and values you have to instill in your children so that when things happen, they know how to carry themselves, they know how to adjust to whatever they need to adjust to, and the respect level. If they respect themselves, they're going to get respect back. Right. It doesn't have to be that tug of war. It doesn't have to be that. There's a way out of everything.
Absolutely. Well, yes. Yeah.
What is the ratio between the men and the women? Is it more or is it balanced?
Okay, so when I first started prison ministry, I couldn't believe that Framingham originally was built for like 200, 250 women. And at the time when I left as a volunteer, I want to believe it was about 700 women in.
In a facility that was designed for 200.
So now they're
overcrowded.
It's overcrowded, and the facilities, I believe they've moved them out now. I believe they moved them to Bay State now. I believe so. Some of them. And so the ratio is becoming horrendous with the women. At one time, it was, of course, the men were more. But I think it's probably almost equal. It's sad to say, almost, especially with the young girls. I mean, they're carrying guns now, and they're carrying the drugs more, and because at one time women wouldn't be searched, like they are now, but now they are. So everything's they're in gangs now.
Right.
We don't see as much in Boston, but they're here.
That's right.
I'm hearing things happen.
So they took the women and moved them to Bay State?
I believe they have, because the facility in Framingham is really not fit. It's like Walpole. Walpole's closed too.
Yes, because they closed Bay State.
Well, they closed, but I think they believe they opened up for the women to go there because the facility in Framingham was deplorable. The building was just not fit. So I believe they opened because Bay State was nothing wrong with Bay State.
Bay State, yes. I never made it to Bay State, but I knew it was.
The plan is to have the women to go to Bay State, I believe, and then those that are doing life. But the ones that are not doing life, they ship some of the women to South Bay. Because the lifers can't go to South Bay because South Bay is county.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So your life as a prison minister spanned it over
21 years.
Over 21 years, dealing with both men and women.
Yes.
What are some of your takeaways, or what are some of your successes that come to mind?
Well, come to mind, we baptized over 700 men while we were there. We serve communion every month. The institution bought the communion for us to serve communion. They served us with the tub to baptize, Yeah, and the uniforms, we used to have them baptized in white uniforms. They would serve the white uniforms for us to baptize. So that was a success. And just the educational programs they were allowed to come in there. They had a mentoring program with fathers and sons dealing with that. The women, I didn't have a really opportunity except the pastoral counseling with them because they moved over to South Bay. But I have a couple of them in the church. They lead the praise and worship team. They came out of jail in 2008. They're with me. Some of them have gotten their housing back. They've gotten their children back. They've gone to school. One is a pastor now. So yeah, so to me, if we only get 1 or 2 stories, that's nice. I don't have to have 500 and I mean, during my tenure, I've served over 10,000 men and women.
That's incredible.
And then every now and then I see them and I don't remember, but they remember me. Unfortunately, I've buried about 30 guys that have been incarcerated. Buried their family members, gone to court with them when they got to hospital, when they got shot. I was there. And so I want to say a success story as far as even when they get shot, they're very emotional, which people are emotional. But we had a young man that got shot and he was at BMC. And there was about 90 people there. It was a mess. They called me. I was at the concert. Mr. Lara, where you at? I said, I'm at a Shirley Caesar concert. They said, call them. They wouldn't tell me. They said, call me when you get out. I said, okay. So I called them. They said, so-and-so got shot. I said, I'm coming. And I went down there. Like I said, it was about 90 people. They were all
to support the young person who was shot.
Yeah, and support their family. They were just all over the place. I said, come on, y'all get in there, because you go to the hospital, you can't have all that kind of activity and all that outburst. They're gonna arrest you. I said, get in here, get in here, get in here. Come in here, let's go, get down. I said, get in here, get in here. And I said, let's pray. I said, I don't care what you're doing, let's pray. And we did, and they had said that gentleman would not make it through the night, but he did make it. Wow. He is paralyzed, but he made it. And I said, you cannot act. I said, understand, grief is not anger. Grief is sorrow, and you feel it. But if you outburst and act unseemly, you're not going to get anything done. And they're going to put you out. You're not going to be able to see what's going on or hear what's going on. And we stayed at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and he came through surgery. And I said, that's what we need to learn to do, is learn how to bring the peace and not, type, want to go toe type women. And they respect me enough, thank God. Where they've been around me, so they knew I'm like their mama. I give them their mama look, and and they complied, and I was grateful. And then another situation at Brigham and Women, to tell you, because BMC is predominantly one of the better, if you get shot, you get stabbed, trauma unit is the best. You want to go there. So this particular shooting happened, it was at Brigham and Women's. At Brigham and Women's, I love them, and they do what they do, but they're not used to having a congregation of us in one place like that. And they called me that night. I was on my way to work, and I had a hoodie on and some Timbs, and I went to the hospital, and I'm looking at them like, are you all serious? I got to go to work. And I said, okay. So they said, they called for the chaplain at the Brigham's. So when she came in the room, I was sitting there, I just sat there. And they said, we don't need you now. And she said, why? He said, with our pastors here. And so she looked at me.
With your Timbs and hoodie.
And she said, excuse me, I am Reverend Laura. At that time I was Ahart. I said, Reverend Ahart, and I have all the credentials. I'm on my way to work, and they called me. She said, I said, I got them. And first time in my life, I saw a bottle of Hennessy this big, and some other thing. And I said, you are not bringing that in the chapel. You're not. I know you're not. And they were all, I said, get in there. And I said, we prayed and we sang, and that gentleman that night too, he made out all right. The bullet went through his spleen, but he was okay. And so, but they were grateful that I said, because you cannot, I said, Brigham women, they will arrest you on the spot. You don't have to worry about it. And so they complied. So I'm grateful through the prison ministry. I never thought that would take me there. When Bishop asked me to come there, I was like, yeah, all right, okay. That was a one thing. But again, it led to 21 years. And even he said that I got a license to preach. He said she's done things that I never could imagine. And broke barriers with white, Hispanic, Haitian, and I used to deliver bereavement notices to the inmates, and no matter what color denomination were. And I remember this Caucasian gentleman, and I pulled him in the room, And I said, come here, I want you to sit down. I said, I just want you to breathe a little bit. And he looked at me. I said, just breathe. I said, I have some news to you, and you're not going to, I don't know how you're going to take it, but let's take it. I just want you to breathe, and let's see how you take it. And so I told him, this gentleman met my son in Walpole.
Really? So he knew him?
He knew him, and knew him, because he kept looking at my son. My oldest son, Rayshawn looks like me, but my oldest son really looks like me.
Okay.
And he kept looking, and Tony said, I look like somebody you know? He said, yeah, kind of. He said, you probably know my mother. And he said, everybody calls her Sister Laura. He said, your mother came to me with such grace and professionalism. He said, my mom died, she sat me down. She just didn't, say your mother died. She sat me down, she held my hand, she let me cry, she prayed with me. He said, if you need anything while you're here, he said, you have it. He said, tell your mother I love her, and I'm always indebted to her for that. So that's what we're supposed to do. No matter when a person's at their lowest, you bring them up. You don't slam them, you don't criticize them, because we all have flaws.
Right. That we absolutely do.
None of us are perfect, and we're all imperfect, and we're trying to serve a perfect God. That's where we're at. And so when you go into a facility like that, even as reentry programs are implemented, the reentry programs are really not designed to help. They're really designed to keep them in prison.
Or to come back.
Come back out. Come in for a minute, and then you go back in. You go back in, come out, come back in, because that's about money.
Right. Economics.
And you get economic status, and they're housed at up to $60,000, $70,000 an inmate. So of course they want their money. They don't want you out there trying to survive.
Right.
And that's the reality of it too. The people don't want to see it. Things are designed to have you fail.
Well, I have a question for you, but just share a story. Mm-hmm. We had hosted a workshop recently called Post-Incarceration Syndrome. Mm-hmm. And one of the speakers was a man who had spent over 30 years in jail. And when they released him to a room with a bed. He didn't know money,
right?
No identification, and he's en route to be exonerated. But
still,
what did they think would happen? Mm-hmm. So he had the foresight he sat there for, I don't know, he said 17 days, and then he went to Brockton Hospital and admitted himself to a mental health ward.
Right. To me, reentry, and I remember we was at the, with Maury Hill, he was at Morningstar Baptist Church. And the thing about the reentry, especially when you know an individual's getting ready to come out, reentry to me should start, let's say that person's been there 15 years, it should be 2 to 3 years before they even come out. Walk with the step, what they need to do. There you go, physical assessment, mental health assessment, finances assessment, housing, your free agreement with your families, all that should be lined up. But again, because it's designed to fail, they're not going to push that with us.
Right. So I have 2 questions, and we have about 5 minutes. Okay. So the first one is I know Boston Globe did this really big article on you, and they said the minister who goes where the need is, because you funerals, prisons, into people's homes, trauma response. So we just want to recognize you for that.
Oh, thank you.
We want to recognize you,
thank you
for that, for sure. And we typically ask people to end with, what do you think, most people, well, not most, many people think if you're in jail, you must be guilty of something.
Right, it's not. And
so what would you say to people who, just a word of advice or just...
Well, you got the judgmental phase has to come out.
Say that again?
The judgmental phase has to come out. That shouldn't be a part of that. Again, we all have flaws. We have things that we shouldn't have done, and some of us didn't get caught. So judgmental phase, that's the big piece of it. Going in open-minded, and because God is the final judge. And I'm a minister, so I'm going to say what God's the final judge, and he has the direct say. But we as individuals, humans, ought to have that compassion for an individual. And even if they are guilty, you still don't have a heaven or hell to put them in. So you help because they have family members that need help. They have children that's depending on them. And they're still a human being, regardless of the crime. So I would say that keep the compassion, keep the humility, and fight the good fight, at either side. That's what I would say.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you to our guest, Reverend Laura Reyes. And thank you for watching Confronting Injustice. For additional information, we will have to provide a website or something for people who would like to contact you, or maybe would like more information about ministry work, prison ministry work. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
There's a lot of men that need the Lord in their heart. There's a lot of them. but they're afraid to ask because around their peers, they make them feel like they're weak.
Exactly.
You know?
I'll be glad to. Anything I can do to help, I'm there.
Wonderful.
And we appreciate it.
The minister always in need.
Yes, yes.
Thank you again
Thank
so
you.
much. And
Thank
thank
you.
you to our viewers. We'll see you next time.